Welcome to the Kapital News. I'm your host, Alex Koritis. Today is Friday, September 18th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast is just another weekly wrap-up. The breaking news this evening, as I'm sure many of you are now aware, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has passed away this evening, surrounded by her family at the age of 87. May she rest in peace. Regardless of what you may think of the justice, she would have been an historic figure in this country, even if she was not a Supreme Court justice. Just simply given her contributions as an attorney with her fight for equal rights when it comes to gender equality, women's rights, what have you. I've stated several times here before on this podcast, from time to time, I will take the time to go on the Supreme Court's website where you have the ability to listen to oral arguments. And of course, you can read the written opinions of the justices as well. But you have the ability to go through, and they archive the oral arguments, I think, for a couple years' worth. And I suggest you do it. You're a taxpayer. You're paying for it. You might as well get some sense of what's going on in the highest court of the land. It's educational, and I find it interesting. And there's no doubt about it that there's a lot of things that I disagree with when it comes to how Justice Ginsburg viewed certain policies, her politics, what have you. But I remember coming across something, and I believe this was during oral argument, or perhaps it was a speech she gave, but I think it was during oral argument before the Supreme Court, where as she was questioning one of the lawyers to a case that she was hearing, she made a very profound point in the lead up to her question, stating that it's the Constitution's rule to expand as many rights to as many people as possible. And she's absolutely right. That's what this country was built upon. Individual liberties. Now, of course, we didn't live up to that too well from the get-go with slavery, with blacks in this country, and with women. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she has a very interesting life story. It's worth looking into. Recent movies and documentaries out on her life. An inspiration for a lot of people, especially a lot of young women. Very historic figure. And the country needs to mourn to mourn her loss and to respect her life's work. And the politics of this, of course, we'll talk about that a little bit. Most likely, unfortunately, it's going to get pretty nasty. What was also interesting about Justice Ginsburg is her very strong relationship and friendship with the late Justice Antonin Scalia, who passed away back in 2016. And of course, we'll talk about that too, because that overlays with the politics that's likely going to ensue over the coming weeks ahead. Now, those two, Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg, couldn't have been further apart ideologically speaking. Their interpretation of the law, their political beliefs, yet they were still able to forge a very long and beautiful friendship. Now, with both of these justices now gone, I hope the passing of Justice Ginsburg is not symbolic of the death of some sort of bipartisanship in this country as well. Because the political universe in this country is toxic. Friends can't talk to each other. Family members can't talk to each other. As soon as you hear that it was a Democrat said this or Republican said that, and you're on the other side, you're done. You don't even want to hear it. This country cannot stand if we continue down this path. So I'm hoping there is still some sort of semblance of bipartisanship. Even though I do not like this two-party system, things do need to get done, and these parties need to come together, and there needs to be some leadership in all of this. Now, the president this evening was at a campaign rally in Minnesota, and this news broke as he was at that rally. And it is my understanding that the president was informed of this news as he was leaving the rally, making his way back to Air Force One, and the press pool was the group that informed him. He didn't even have a campaign member or a member of his cabinet, or administration, I should say, inform him as he was getting off stage. And he gave a good remark. I actually caught this, his remarks, and you could tell by his body language that I do believe that was the first time he heard this news. And he was saddened by it, as am I, to hear this. And you have to respect her life, whether you agree with a lot of her opinions and decisions or not. And that's exactly the right response that we want to hear. And I hope the president can continue down that vein of respecting and admiring her life's accomplishments and mourning her loss. Now, again, the politics will probably get heated in the not too distant future. At least give a couple days. It is Friday, so hopefully the weekend is somewhat tampered down. Allow the country to mourn her loss, allow her family to mourn her loss before the politics starts getting heated and starts getting nasty in all probability. Now, the president did recently also announce a list of potential nominees to the Supreme Court should a vacancy open up. And one would imagine that there has been some vetting of those prospective candidates. So now you would think that that would sort of be hastened, and the president is going to start going through that list and probably start interviewing a lot of those potential candidates one-on-one to get a better read. Clearly, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a woman, chances are that Donald Trump will then nominate another woman to the bench, and that's possible. He clearly has women on his list, so I would not be surprised if he does that. Now, where the politics are likely to get nasty, and there's already been comments out from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell stating that the Senate will go through with the confirmation process. Now, of course, that assumes that the president puts somebody up for nomination, which I imagine he will. But if you recall, and this goes back to Justice Antonin Scalia, he passed away in 2016. Well, 2016 was a presidential election year as well. And Mitch McConnell said that we are not going to go through the confirmation process in the Senate when it comes to a vacant Supreme Court justice seat. We're just not going to do it. This is an election year. The American people get to decide the president. The president gets to decide the Supreme Court nominee. And that's all there is to it. Now, President Obama at the time, he nominated Merrick Garland, I believe his name was, and that went nowhere. So you got to somewhat feel bad for that judge because, here he is thinking, okay, yeah, the politics are nasty even back in 2016, but I believe this was back in February of 2016. The election wasn't going to be until November, obviously. A lot of time. Yeah, it's nasty politics, but I'm appointed here. I'm nominated by President Obama. We'll get through the politics, and I'll end up on the bench in all likelihood. Well, that did not happen. Mitch McConnell said it wasn't going to happen, and it didn't happen. So now Mitch McConnell is immediately out there saying that, yes, the confirmation process will move forward. You have the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer out of New York, coming out, and he put out a press statement that was, I think it was a verbatim statement of what Mitch McConnell said 4 years ago. Okay, so now the hypocrisy is so thick you can cut it with a knife. It's also, again, an election year. The Senate confirms. You just need a simple majority, so you need 51 senators. The Republicans have that many senators. The question is, will they get the votes? Now, technically, they just need 50 senators because Mike Pence could come in to break the tie, and of course, he would vote in the affirmative for the president's nominee. But you have a lot of elections, senatorial elections, that are up for grabs, that are in battleground states, and you have some of those very candidates who have already mentioned this type of scenario and said, if this should happen again, that meaning a Supreme Court justice should retire or pass away in an election year, that the election will dictate, meaning you vote for the president, and then we will go through the nominating and confirmation process. So you have Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who, it's my understanding, at least at this juncture, is not a shoo-in for his Senate race. He is also the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So he would be responsible for moving this through. You remember he was in charge also, I believe it was, during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And if it wasn't him, it was Chuck Grassley. And Chuck Grassley is also, Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican out of Iowa, is also of the same mindset, given his previous statements, that we are not going to do what we did in we are going to do basically what we did in 2016 and allow the election to dictate. We're not going to confirm a nominee. So that's two. And those are heavy hitters within the Senate. You then have, I believe, Senator Murkowski out of Alaska who said the same thing. Susan Collins out of Maine saying the same thing. You have Senator Mitt Romney out of Utah, who is no friend of the president. So he might want to take a stand against the president on this and say, we got to let the election dictate how that moves forward. You have, who's the other one? I think you have Senator Tillis out of North Carolina, which is clearly a battleground state. So this is not a given, even though technically you have the numbers on the Republican side in the Senate to potentially pass somebody to the Supreme Court. It's not a shoo-in. And then the question also becomes, would this take place prior to the election? Or would this whole process actually go beyond election date, November 3rd, and you sort of have a lame duck session? But that doesn't mean that the Senate couldn't have a vote. They very well could. So this, you could end up with a scenario where Donald Trump nominates somebody. This nominee does not get confirmed prior to November 3rd. Again, it's all hypothetical. Hypothetically, Joe Biden is president-elect, but then the Senate still confirms. So this could get very, very hairy. And typically, when it comes to the Supreme Court justices, or really the court system at all, it usually really jazzes up the Republican side more than it does the Democratic side. So it's going to be interesting now to see how the Democrats in that party at large responds, because Justice Ginsburg was a liberal justice. And there were 3 women on the Supreme Court. Now there is 2. There is Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan. Both of those individuals are also liberal-leaning. And then you have Justice Breyer, who is also liberal-leaning, and that is about it. Everybody else on the court is more conservative-leaning, if you will. So this could really stack the deck of having conservative judges on the Supreme Court, which, of course, could give a lot of momentum for the Republicans to say, okay, now we definitely got to get Trump in there. I was on the fence, but now we got to do it because this is a chance, but based almost an opportunity of a lifetime, because these are lifetime appointments, to really have that many conservative judges, if you will, on the Supreme Court. Counter, the Democrats are going to say, oh, no, we cannot have this happen. So a lot of people who might have said, I'm not really for Biden, but he's got to be the guy that nominates the next Supreme Court justice. So now I got to go out and vote for him for this purpose. So this is just another curveball, another twist in this roller coaster ride that is 2020. It's going to get nasty, but I really hope that the country has time to mourn her loss, as does her family, because, standing with a frame of 5 foot nothing, 100 pounds wet, probably, she stood up to giants, and on many occasions, she was victorious. And that's what this country is all about. You have a voice, you have an opinion, you stand up to the powers that be, and you make a change for the better. And on many occasions, she did. Other times, we can have those debates. But again, that's also what this country is about. Thoughts and prayers with her family, and may she rest in peace. Earlier this week, obviously, we talked about the town halls between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Again, no major gaffes with President Trump during his town hall. No major gaffes with Vice President Biden during his town hall yesterday evening. That's what we expected. Is this a little bit of a sneak preview as to how the debates are going to look on September 29th, hosted by Fox News anchor Chris Wallace? Maybe a little bit. I honestly think, and I've stated this many times before, that these debates are going to be a national embarrassment. Just how both of these individuals, President Trump and Vice President Biden, how they speak, it's just going to the amount of BS that we are going to hear is going to be off the charts. So I've raised this point before. Will Chris Wallace really start to inject himself more so into these debates and really call both of these candidates out? And to be perfectly honest with you, I hope he does. I hope he does. If Trump starts going off the rails and starts making up BS, one story after the next, I hope Chris Wallace says that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. If Biden starts doing the same thing, I hope he interjects and says that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, that's not what you said then, it's not what you blah, blah, blah. I really do. Because the country needs to see it. Because everybody is siloed in. You get your little picture, you get your meme, whatever you want to call them, you get your picture with the quotes in a sentence on somebody's picture. Well, it has to be what they said. I got it. My friend sent me. It's from Facebook. It's from Twitter, whatever. It's got to be true. No, you're just saying something or reading something that you want to see, that you want to hear. That's mainly what all of this is. That's what a lot of the election interference is coming down to. We talked about that earlier this week in the social disorder. How dangerous social media is and how effective it can be for outside parties, Russia, China, anybody else for that matter, or a wealthy individual for that matter within the United States, because that's all it takes is money. Put up some ads on Facebook, other social media platforms. You check your little boxes, and boom, out it goes to millions of people like that. And then they're going to circulate it amongst their friends. So there you go. It's a vicious, negative cycle. I mean, you can affect an election in the most powerful country in the world, electing the most powerful individual in the world with a few $1 million because you know how to use Facebook. Talk about getting your bang for your buck. That's dangerous. And it's really telling to the state of the mentality and the intelligence of the American electorate. Because it's just that simple. All I got to do is send something out there to people because I know what they want to hear. I know what they want to see. And that's it. And that's all they're going to hear. And that's all they're going to see because that's all they want to hear. And that's all they want to see. They don't want to go to the other side. That's why I say I beg you to turn on the other stations, as many stations as you possibly can. Don't just listen to Fox News. Don't just listen to MSNBC. Flip back and forth constantly. Don't just read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or Bloomberg. You got to take in as much information as you possibly can because there are so many opinions and so much information is being thrown out to us. Breaking news all the time. It gets very difficult. And everybody likes to hear what they want to hear. Everybody wants to see what they want to see. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. You know, if somebody starts talking bad on the Federal Reserve, I'm like, hell yeah, that's what I want to hear. But you got to read it, and you got to read it objectively. Does it make sense? And you got to listen to other arguments too. You know, in that vein, you have modern monetary theory. You know, I have to study that. I have to understand what that means. I don't agree with it, but I got to talk about it because if somebody's going to throw that out there, well, maybe it's an idea, maybe it has legs. You have to get as much information as you possibly can. And social media is just extremely dangerous, as far as I'm concerned. But those were the town halls. Again, no major gaffes. We'll see what happens on the 29th. I think it's going to be a national embarrassment. The bar is set very low for Joe Biden, and that's basically a gift from Donald Trump. But if Joe Biden craps the bed, that it could be game, set, match right out of that one. So we'll see, and we'll provide our analysis following that debate, obviously, and also some further analysis on the Electoral College. But I do want to wait for that conclusion of the first debate because it's going to be historic in one form or another. Yesterday, we talked about some of the economic news that was released. Of course, that was the initial jobless claims was what we focused on primarily. An additional a total of 29.8 million Americans collecting some form of unemployment insurance. 29.8 million. That is an increase from the prior week of some 98,000. Not in the right direction. Per our analysis yesterday, this is sort of the continuation of what we've been seeing through various surveys that we discussed during the past couple of weeks. One this week being that small business survey, then the survey out of NPR, which was just a more broad-based across the country, but with a focus on the 4 largest cities within the country. Things are not moving in the right direction, unfortunately, but that is no surprise to the Kapital News. That is no surprise to this audience because a printing press is not a panacea. The Nobody Cares Act is not a panacea. Those funds are exhausted. The $1,200 checks are gone. The extra $600 per week if you were unemployed is gone. Now, some of that money was saved by those who could. And some people with bigger cities or health issues or children or what have you, it's gone. It's gone. Half the country's broke. No savings. In debt. And a lot of these numbers were like this before COVID-19. Unfortunately, heartbreaking. I can't remember how many times I said this is another heartbreaking paragraph in that NPR Harvard survey, which just continued to tell us what we already knew. The bailouts, the PPP loans are exhausted, or just about so. Moratoriums, yes, they've been extended, but how much longer are they going to continue to be extended? Landlords still owe money. They still got to pay the bank or their investors. They still have to pay somebody too. And then all of these homeowners and all of these renters, they're still responsible for all of that back rent and back mortgage payments. So what's going on here? So you have, you can debate the number of how many evictions are waiting in the wings, but it's in the millions. It was 10 million during the great financial crisis. We have projections as high as 40 million now. That is heartbreaking. So these moratoriums just aren't going to do it. It's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's not going to do it. It might get you through an election, but what are you going to do afterwards? And we don't hear really any plan from Thunder Thumbs or Sleepy Joe. We just don't. There's no discussion on any of these structural issues, which I stated weeks ago when you had the DNC circus and the RNC circus in town. I said, you're not going to hear any of these structural issues being discussed. Or if they're discussed, there's not going to be any type of policy prescription. Well, they were basically not discussed or covered at all, and there were no policy prescriptions. No surprise. So 29.8 million collecting. An increase also in regular state unemployment, so that might be indicative of a second wave of layoffs. Now starting to hit perhaps white-collar workers, and of course, with higher earners, they're responsible for most of the spending. And consumption is the biggest contributor to GDP growth in this country. So that's just, again, another double whammy in the bad. We have the other bailouts, as we discussed yesterday with the airlines. They already received billions of dollars. Now they're back in Washington asking for more. Up to $25 billion is the number that's being thrown around. Yesterday, we said, well, if that's going to save what they say is 30 to 50,000 jobs, well, if you're going to save 50,000 jobs, That's $500,000 per job. If you save 30,000 jobs, that's $833,000 per job. Does that make sense? That's akin to our analysis before when we talked about the $3 trillion that they just, the Banana Republic printing press created out of thin air. Several months ago, $3 trillion? At the time, you had tens of millions of unemployed, and we said whatever the number was, it came out to about $80,000 per job. $80,000 per job, and at the time, which is still the case, a lot of jobs that are being lost, they're not even close to making that kind of money. Their salary is nowhere near $80,000. Making $15 an hour, $20 an hour if they're lucky. This is why we're against all of these bailouts. This is what happens. Then you have the picking of the winners and the losers. Another survey out from Yelp, online review service of businesses. Of the businesses that have shut down, 60% of them aren't coming back. Okay? That's heartbreaking. And then we learned on Wednesday from Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that a lot of the money from the Federal Reserve's one of their Alphabet Soup's emergency facilities, the Main Street lending facility, it's barely been tapped. Out of the billions and billions of dollars that exist within that facility, about $1.5 billion has been used. And why? Oh, because the Treasury Department doesn't want the banks to give out loans where they're going to lose money. Well, then why did you pass the Nobody Cares Act? You see why I call it the Nobody Cares Act? Because they can pass this crap, but who are they giving the money to? Just like they said in that NPR Harvard survey, one of the architects, one of the directors from Harvard, who was responsible for that survey, one of the quotes was, this is much, much worse than I thought it was going to be, considering the CARES Act, the Nobody Cares Act, and everything that's been done. I suggest, as I did when we covered that survey, that individual from Harvard listen to the Kapital News so he knows where all that money's going. It's not going to Main Street. You get it? You understand who these jokers work for? It's not you. You don't owe them anything. You do not owe them your vote, your loyalty, your respect. They have done nothing to earn it. Leave them. At the very least, please change your registration. I advocate for you to become a libertarian, but independent, unaffiliated Mickey Mouse Club. Just leave the Republican Party, leave the Democratic Party, please. Because you want to talk about nasty, just wait until this Supreme Court nomination. So that's some of the news from this week. A continuation of what we have been seeing. We will get one more official jobs report prior to November 3rd, the election. That will come out in a few short weeks already. We're already halfway through the month of September, if you can believe it. So the first Friday of October will be the official jobs report for September, and then that will be it. Of course, we will continue to get the weekly initial jobless claims through the month of November, or through the month of October in the lead up to the election. The end of September is obviously the end of the third quarter as well. And so we are likely going to get the first report, the first readout of GDP at the end of October, a few short days before the election. And because we were so down in the negative during the second quarter, it's not going to be difficult to really look like there was a bounce back in the third quarter. And Thunder Thumbs is going to seize on that. Most likely, and I will have to wait and see, but most likely that there will be that bounce back, but it's really a head fake because all of this was from such a low starting point, and furthermore, so much of this comes from the printing press. $7 trillion this year alone, and of course also at the end of September is the conclusion of the fiscal year. So we're north of an actual budget deficit of $4 trillion, and we still got a couple weeks to go. All right, so We covered a lot today. We covered a lot this week, as we normally do. I imagine the same will be the case for next week and as we progress through the rest of 2020 in this election season. So if there's some breaking news, perhaps I will do a week ahead segment over the weekend. If not, you will catch me here back on Monday. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.